Kansas City supporters, the decision is definitively finalized. I remain absolutely committed for 2026, fully prepared to represent this franchise and perform for our demographic once more. The public previously witnessed the tight end finalizing what the market presumed was his terminal professional agreement, as spectators logically deduced his athletic viability was rapidly concluding. However, recent investigative leaks indicate he successfully secured a lucrative 3-year pact valued near $54 million. Critically, Kansas City ownership remains unconvinced, allegedly maneuvering to void this specific agreement. Let us examine the underlying data. Autumn initiated an unprecedented paradigm shift. Historically, this organization avoids frequent defeats, yet they suffered an unceremonious postseason elimination just last week. For the initial instance since 2014, the Kansas City franchise definitively failed to secure a vital postseason berth. Management concluded the 2025 campaign logging a disastrous 6-11 record, sharply deviating from their dominant stretch of consecutive championship rings and 8 conference title bids. Marking their first playoff absence since 2014, this collapse snapped an elite trajectory where their starting quarterback consistently secured conference championship access across his initial 7 active campaigns. That unprecedented streak of 8 consecutive conference title appearances fundamentally died in 2025. The quarterback's knee reconstruction severely restricted his evasion capabilities, compounded by catastrophic offensive line regression. Furthermore, at 35 years old, the veteran tight end, who single-handedly anchored this offensive scheme for 13 brutal campaigns, generated statistical metrics explicitly indicative of an aging asset rapidly approaching the absolute termination of his professional contract window. Examining his recent broadcast statements reveals a stark acceptance of physical decline. During 2025, he managed only 76 receptions, yielding 851 yards and 5 scores across 17 matchups. While league averages might deem those statistics functionally acceptable, they represent severe regression against his historical baseline. During 2022, his final 1,000-yard campaign, he dominated with 110 catches, 1,338 yards, and 12 touchdowns. Back in 2020, he established positional dominance by amassing 1,416 receiving yards across 15 contests. By 2018, he initially eclipsed the century mark for receptions, securing his status as the premier historical asset to achieve that volume repeatedly. His 2025 output reflected a stubborn veteran logging minutes and extracting an 11th legacy all-star nod, yet clearly failing to replicate the explosive athletic efficiency of his prime. His prior 2-year $34.25 million extension, executed in 2024, officially lapsed entering the 2026 fiscal calendar. This contractual void forced him into the open market for the initial time since the organization drafted him 63rd overall during the 2013 selection process. Subsequently, he addressed the media via his personal platform. My singular objective remains executing with maximum intensity, maintaining professional reliability, and optimizing our organizational probability for victory. Ultimately, the fundamental metric for success in this violent business is securing championship trophies. Such candid statements expose an aging professional psychologically grappling with the harsh reality of completing a grueling regular schedule devoid of any resultant postseason dividends. We participate in this demanding industry specifically to access those high-stakes elimination rounds. Yet fundamentally, surviving within the highest professional tier remains a brutal baseline accomplishment. Broadcasting pundits astutely identified an undercurrent of resignation far exceeding standard excuses for statistical regression. They detected a veteran actively conducting a sobering career audit. Representing this franchise remains a distinct corporate privilege. Suiting up stands as a tremendous professional honor, competing fiercely for your locker room peers, validating your family's financial sacrifices, and representing your hometown demographic with unquestionable loyalty. Rhetoric heavily emphasizing organizational respect and familial tribute explicitly signals imminent retirement rather than sustained employment. This auditory evidence suggests an athlete rigorously analyzing his physical toll against rapidly diminishing occupational rewards. Frankly speaking, if management authorizes another opportunity to compete, I will undoubtedly step onto the gridiron and violently execute my contractual responsibilities with total passion. Broadcast critic Teddy Bruschi explicitly verbalized the underlying consensus. His delivery unequivocally mirrors someone facing their imminent professional termination. The industry holds massive respect for his dominance, yet his verbal delivery explicitly exposes someone whose operational window has permanently shut. This exact critical narrative permeated mainstream sports journalism immediately following the organization's unceremonious elimination from playoff contention. Consider the underlying data. Prior to 2025, this asset never endured a single campaign devoid of a conference title berth since his primary quarterback assumed starting duties back in 2018. That specific offensive duo engineered 54 standard season scoring connections, firmly establishing the most prolific statistical tandem ever recorded in the franchise's extensive history. Consequently, aggressive speculation regarding whether this historical partnership had logged its terminal offensive snap severely clouded the front office's strategic offseason planning without immediate resolution. The fundamental tragedy within this specific dataset remains glaring. Industry purists demand a triumphant final exit alongside his franchise quarterback. Instead, terminating his tenure following an abysmal 6-11 record without a proper ceremonial departure, lacking a concluding postseason push, and completely deprived of the optical closure of exiting alongside his foundational teammate, represents the exact public relations nightmare management desperately sought to avoid. Regrettably, harsh mathematical realities dictate otherwise. Nevertheless, we are objectively evaluating a generational talent whose undisputed metrics mathematically guarantee immediate enshrinement into the professional football sanctuary on his initial ballot. Analyzing cumulative standard season metrics through 2025 reveals staggering output: 1,080 catches, 13,002 yards, and 82 scores over 192 appearances. His corporate resume commands ultimate respect, featuring 11 All-Star nods, 4 Premier All-League designations, and 3 distinct championship rings, exclusively executed under a single corporate banner, guided by one strategic head coach, and tied to a singular geographic market. Furthermore, his playoff analytics require entirely independent statistical scrutiny, logging 178 grabs, 2,078 receiving yards, and 20 scores throughout 25 elimination brackets, firmly establishes the highest historical playoff reception volume, mathematically shattering the benchmark previously held by Jerry Rice. He currently maintains the absolute league ceiling for successive 1,000-yard positional campaigns, stringing together 7 consecutive dominant fiscal years. Additionally, he possesses the ultimate single-season yardage peak for his designated position. Sustaining an organizational benchmark, he recorded a reception in 174 straight contests. Yet, entering the first quarter of 2026, this unprecedented equity sat tethered to a completely voided agreement. Analysts swiftly pivoted strategic evaluations from his individual trajectory to calculate the franchise's projected operational viability without him. Quantifying the exact financial capital required to systematically overhaul this offensive infrastructure becomes imperative if the primary asset who anchored their production for over 10 years officially departs. Objectively, management is confronting a superficial cosmetic adjustment rather than a catastrophic structural crisis. The data suggests this transition will absolutely not demand an exhaustive expenditure of front office resources. Executing a total system demolition remains completely unnecessary. We are forecasting a strategic renovation, absolutely not a foundational rebuild, given their core assets definitively persist. Factoring in their elite quarterback, heavily capitalized blocking unit, and perimeter velocity, the infrastructure survives. However, analytical experts immediately pinpointed a highly critical schematic vulnerability. The offensive unit critically lacked a dynamic pass-catching operative originating from the backfield, a vital tactical requirement historically fulfilled by versatile assets within this specific coaching methodology. Removing his gravitational impact, which historically fractures defensive zone architectures and aggressively drags secondary coverage toward the central hash marks, introduces massive spatial complications. Without his premier tight end on the field moving forward, the quarterback faced an unprecedentedly tight operational window, completely lacking the familiar safety net he'd relied upon for years. Consequently, management needs to strip the foundation bare, install a rock-solid infrastructure, and aggressively prioritize a ground-and-pound offensive strategy. Mainstream broadcasting networks deliberately spun the situation as a critical inflection point, heavily scrutinizing both the organization and the veteran. While analysts recklessly broadcasted speculative theories, They remained utterly ignorant that the ownership group had already locked in the franchise's trajectory, aggressively refuting the fabricated narratives pushed by those sensationalized media hit pieces. Prior to 2026's open market commencing, the true financial reality emerged, effectively shutting down every single baseless rumor peddled by click-driven journalists. On March 23, 2026, league headquarters strictly confirmed the superstar locked a 3-year, $54.735 million extension with the reigning champions. Insiders rigorously verified the agreement's absolute ceiling hits $57.7 million. Digital engagement exploded immediately, generating 59,000 approvals, 3.7 thousand shares, and surpassing 7.7 million impressions. The iconic veteran subsequently addressed the media, delivering the exact unapologetic reassurance the fanbase desperately required. He candidly hyped the supporters, publicly verifying the ink was dry and projecting aggressive enthusiasm to represent the franchise throughout the 2026 season. Any residual introspection or philosophical exhaustion previously broadcasted during his digital segments following that postseason elimination had completely evaporated, replaced entirely by the ruthless enforcer who secures 110 receptions, violently bulldozes secondary defenders on early downs, and commands deafening chaos from the home stadium. The boardroom verdict was finalized, injecting high-stakes momentum and demanding absolute pandemonium from their notoriously hostile crowd. Vowing a rapid turf return, those brief 11 seconds forcefully dismantled and completely re-engineered the media's off-season agenda. Management definitively refused to terminate the agreement. Instead, leadership strategically afforded him maximum leverage and breathing room, eventually executing a lucrative extension upon his final green light. The sensationalized headlines alleging internal mutiny or catastrophic relationship breakdowns were fundamentally and definitively proven fraudulent. The reality centered entirely on brilliant financial structuring, revealing a masterful cap management blueprint demanding rigorous, data-driven scrutiny. The transaction is legally ironclad. The iconic pass catcher is formally retained on the organization's roster for another highly anticipated high-stakes campaign. Functionally, it strictly represents a 1-year commitment, despite league PR touting a 3-year, $54.735 million facade, securing 12 more months before his inevitable retirement, or pivoting toward profitable media ventures. The league technically defines these optical illusions as dummy timelines, administrative tricks engineered with zero legal duty to disperse cash or mandate physical snaps. Cap accounting requires this. They remain strictly spreadsheet entries, not binding financial promises. The back end of this extension perfectly exemplifies that tactic, phantom timelines featuring minimum base compensation, guaranteeing zero actual cash disbursements during 2027 or 2028. Management strategically integrated these terms solely to mathematically amortize the superstar's massive upfront cash injection across multiple financial cycles rather than absorbing it immediately, a brilliant operational loophole that drastically slashes the fiscal penalty against the 2026 budget constraint. Executed precisely as the open market activated, critical analysis reveals this is effectively a 1-year, $12 million baseline arrangement featuring an additional $3 million in performance-based escalators engineered by his representation, carefully structured across a brutal 17-game slate for a 36-year-old veteran. However, the public optics aggressively contradict the underlying math. The headline artificially trumpets a 3-year, $54 million agreement. Marketing $57 million in maximum triggers grants the agency immense promotional leverage, completely shielding the front office from actual fiscal damage since the back-end timeline is entirely fabricated. Those closing campaigns strictly function as mathematical buffers, engineered to artificially suppress roster expenditures, a complex but brilliantly executed executive maneuver. Ultimately, this cap gymnastics crashes his 2026 financial liability to roughly $4.9 million, entirely bypassing 12. He fundamentally stabilizes the attack for a championship-contending squad, simultaneously wielding the massive economic leverage of the most universally marketable pass catcher in league history. That $4.9 million footprint in 2026 grants executive leadership critical liquidity to aggressively plug roster vulnerabilities exposed during their 6-11 implosion. They desperately require trench reinforcements and a dynamic backfield threat to effectively replicate that historic offensive production, which analysts intensely scrutinized, alongside rapid perimeter receivers designed to exploit gaping schematic voids generated by his dominant interior gravity. Suppressing that financial burden perfectly aligns with the organization's ruthless strategy of maximizing operational liquidity, firmly securing franchise pillars in case the veteran opts for another grueling campaign. Despite the multi-season illusion, it fundamentally guarantees $12 million for a singular campaign. This dual-purpose framework overtly signals management's profoundly analytical, respectful valuation of their superstar. If the offense continues aggressively funneling through his elite production after 2026, precisely mirroring his 14-year dominance, the architecture seamlessly permits continuity devoid of hostile bargaining. Executives deliberately engineered a retention failsafe beyond 2026, actively avoiding toxic financial liabilities amidst unpredictable longevity. Leadership empowered him to exit gracefully without triggering fiscal disasters or messy PR disputes. The entire masterclass leveraging phantom timelines and amortized cash injections, alongside layered performance triggers, deliberately shields both parties from reputational damage if 2026 concludes his career. But currently, the legendary weapon is definitively locked in. The franchise quarterback, who critically intercepted negotiations via digital video calls to aggressively recruit his teammate, actively engineered this roster retention rather than operating passively. The quarterback strictly anchored his offensive operation upon his receiver's entirely unguardable physical presence. He acts as the ultimate failsafe on critical downs, an absolute nightmare matchup inside the scoring area, and a punishing enforcer securing the perimeter during deceptive misdirection schemes. The relentless closer who consistently normalizes high-pressure, game-winning conversions actively pressured upper management to finalize this exact agreement. Head coach Andy Reid completely backed his return, having mentored the tight end since 2013 while forging the franchise's ultimate offensive duo. Meanwhile, owner Clark Hunt never delivered any threats, completely avoided media manipulation, and outright refused to entertain these bogus dismissal rumors, simply providing the necessary breathing room and financial paperwork for the veteran's own terms. Online discourse fractured exactly as anticipated. Half the crowd viewed this extension as pure allegiance, a team paying respects to a legendary cornerstone heading into his presumed swan song. The opposition launched their standard complaints, crying about compensation for past glory and labeling it a taxpayer subsidy for pop star access. Questioning if a 36-year-old weapon warrants a fresh deal after missing the postseason remains a perfectly valid athletic critique, yet that argument completely deviates from the sensationalized termination narratives being peddled. Ownership zeroed out absolutely nothing. Instead, executives drafted an agreement meticulously engineered to shield their crucial current year salary cap limitations. They retained absolute flexibility for future operations, delivering a sweetheart deal directly to the organization's 10-year poster boy. The actual mystery goes beyond the financial blueprints. We must examine why management retained him amidst dipping metrics and authentic PR fires, outright ignoring those fabricated tabloid demands for his head. Grasping this reality requires analyzing his massive leverage during games, in pop culture, and across the vital financial ledgers driving this corporate enterprise. Dismissal remained totally off the table for one core reason. Try almost $1 billion. That colossal figure represents the league's calculated marketing equity spawned by this high-profile romance between September 2023 and early 2025. Apex Marketing Group quantified this massive tsunami of broadcast exposure, viral online traction, exploding retail transactions, skyrocketing stadium pricing, and an unprecedented influx of fresh demographics directly triggered by this superstar's stadium visits. Football executives spent years failing to attract women demographics before accidentally discovering the ultimate mass market catalyst. Her inaugural stadium debut during a September 2023 blowout of Chicago immediately captured 24.3 million screens, dominating that weekend's ratings. 7 days later against New York, her recurring presence drove viewership to 27 million, a primetime record unmatched since the previous championship broadcast. Growth simply refused to stall. Postseason matchups featuring her during the 2023 run absolutely annihilated previous television benchmarks. We recorded 50.4 million eyeballs for the divisional clash and an insane 55.5 million for the conference title match. These statistics easily match the mega events. Corporate executives routinely burn billions trying to artificially generate via concerts and global expansions. Average audience sizes spiked 7% throughout 2023, hitting 17.9 million levels unseen since 2015. Standard athletic drama hardly caused this. It stemmed directly from uninitiated demographics tuning into Gridiron coverage for novelty reasons and permanently sticking around. Women watching increased by 9% globally, revealing groundbreaking behavioral shifts among the specific fan bases this artist directly controls. The data shows a 53% explosion in teenage girls, 24% expansion for females aged 18 to 24, plus 34% gains for those over 35. Researchers in 2026 verified that broadcasts featuring her camera shots commanded roughly one-third more engagement than standard matchups. This remarkable bonus viewership stabilized consistently, enduring even when strict safety protocols and touring conflicts severely limited her 2025 stadium visits. Females currently comprise almost 47% of the league's consumer base, jumping drastically from the historical 37 to 40% baseline held before 2023. Such massive market penetration only multiplies while the romance thrives. Retaining him isn't an athletic strategy, it is pure corporate wealth management. His apparel revenues skyrocketed 400% overnight following her debut, securing elite retail dominance. Concurrently, team-branded transactions from her loyalists tripled annually. Secondary brokers witnessed triple the standard inquiry rates alongside 35 to 40% ticket markups anytime gossip hinted she might hit the luxury suites. League brand partnerships jumped 15%, securing $235 billion throughout 2023, riding that momentum straight through 2024. All these financial windfalls directly trace back to a singular romance, an alliance that has only solidified since the ink dried on this new paperwork. The power couple officially locked down their August 2025 engagement, immediately sparking massive industry rumors regarding a summer 2026 ceremony. This proposal guarantees the decade's ultimate entertainment meets athletics phenomenon won't just linger throughout the 2026 Gridiron campaign. It promises to explode into an absolutely unprecedented mainstream spectacle, rivaling royal weddings for global media saturation. Terminating his contract before such a monumentally lucrative matrimonial timeline means management intentionally trashing an economic juggernaut utterly impossible to duplicate athletically. Absorbing a $4.9 million roster penalty barely registers as pocket change compared to these astronomical profit margins. However, this unprecedented pop culture goldmine isn't the sole variable shutting down those termination theories. The veteran's personal optics leading up to this era definitely generated severe public relations turbulence, yet ownership firmly committed anyway. That explicitly proves his corporate value easily crushes any lingering reputational baggage threatening the bottom line. Come November 2023, internet sleuths unearthed problematic social media posts from his collegiate days in Ohio. These 2010 and 2011 updates featured a 20 and 21-year-old athlete aggressively targeting females with horrific weight-based insults, toxic, discriminatory slurs, and explicitly weaponizing homophobic vocabulary to blindly trash digital entertainment. Fact-checkers at Snopes immediately validated the digital footprints, triggering extensive mainstream investigations by top-tier journalistic outlets. Media outlets like the Daily Beast, alongside the entire Taylor Swift fandom, initially championed those past posts as endearing, raw evidence cementing his brand as an authentic, humorous, and humble guy next door. Joy Behar blasted his reading skills on national television. Those controversial posts vanished from his profile around mid-November 2023, yet internet sleuths had already immortalized them via digital snapshots and forum discussions, cementing an unavoidable digital footprint. Kelce tackled the controversy via his audio show, brushing the remarks off as childhood foolishness while dodging any genuine mea culpa. Public discourse lingered without closure, flaring up repeatedly over 2024 and 2025. Subsequently, the philanthropic probe emerged. Government financial records analyzing his philanthropic venture, the 87 and Running Foundation, which targets adolescent athletics and science programs across Ohio and Missouri, revealed that the entity generated roughly $1.5 million from 2021 through 2024, yet allocated a mere 41 cents per dollar to actual initiatives. The other 59 cents funded overhead expenses, sparking heavy criticism since massive payouts went straight to ANA Management Group, an enterprise launched by his own financial advisors, immediately triggering red flags regarding ethical oversight and conflict of interest, while probing if the fiscal framework actually benefited the community or merely lined the pockets of internal executives. During this audit, the governing council possessed just a pair of executives, completely missing conventional leadership roles. Journalists at the Arizona Republic published their comprehensive financial exposé during December 2025, coinciding exactly with Kansas City finalizing a brutal 6-11 season failure, making waves across both sports networks and tabloid circuits. Ironically, he received a nomination for the league's most prestigious humanitarian accolade during that exact media storm. His nonprofit quickly revised their paperwork, appointed new directors, and pledged $800,000 toward upcoming neighborhood projects. Still, this conflicting timeline, balancing prestigious humanitarian recognition against a fiscal probe, severely complicated his mainstream reputation far beyond what those resurfaced posts ever accomplished. Professionally, his aggressive gridiron antics have cost him more than $133,000 in league penalties. That hefty price tag reflects an athlete constantly pushing boundaries and snapping. For instance, he forfeited $24,039 during 2016 after hurling gear at a referee. He lost $12,500 in 2020 for celebrating on the goalpost, plus a whopping $149,490 in 2025 following inappropriate sideline behavior. He also coughed up $11,255 for mocking Buffalo players during their conference title match, alongside his explosive Super Bowl 58 outburst in 2024. Frustrated by a turnover, he aggressively shoved his head coach on international television, nearly knocking him down, forcing an awkward digital defense days later. Management labeled the outburst intolerable. By 2025, he started dodging mandatory press conferences following defeats, inviting harsh backlash from veteran broadcasters like Chris Mad Dog Russo, who slammed the silent treatment as incredibly immature and unprofessional. Despite escaping monetary discipline and avoiding game bans or legal trouble entirely, these antics shrink when compared to the massive on-field success he engineers. His unmatched production and scoring, postseason dominance, broadcast ratings, apparel sales, and sheer gravitational impact allowed the coaching staff to construct their entire playbook around him. Consequently, ownership was never realistically going to terminate his employment over off-field noise. The team brass emphasized back in January 2026 that the veteran still possessed elite skills, guaranteeing him unlimited grace periods to contemplate retirement. Management skipped ultimatums, avoided media posturing, and refused to weaponize insider reports against their star athlete, opting instead for unwavering loyalty to a 6'5", 250-pound behemoth who completely revolutionized pass-catching expectations. Executives simply refused to shut the door without letting the legend himself dictate his own exit strategy. Announcing his comeback, the veteran profusely thanked ownership, showcasing immense appreciation for his 13-year tenure. This executive dynamic lacks typical locker room toxicity. You will not find passive-aggressive agent battles or fabricated front office conflicts here. This organization constructed a literal empire on the shoulders of an athlete who broke the mold, weathered a catastrophic 6-11 campaign fearlessly, and secured his return instantly for what essentially constitutes pocket change in league economics. His historical metrics look like somebody completely hacked the sport to build the ultimate weapon. With 10,080 catches, 13,002 receiving yards, 82 scores, 3 championship rings, 11 All-Star nods, and 7 1,000-yard campaigns, he holds every major record. Furthermore, his playoff resume boasts 178 grabs and 278 yards, alongside 20 scores over 25 matchups, solidifying the most dominant playoff run ever witnessed from his position. Tactically, his freelance patterns dissect coverages before the snap, destroying zone schemes with an efficiency metric widely considered untouchable. Furthermore, his open field elusiveness continues to break tackle records previously thought impossible for big men. By demanding double coverage, he organically manufactures wide open lanes for teammates, proving his strategic value remains completely irreplaceable. Rather, any perceived decline simply justifies a heavily backloaded $4.9 million salary cleverly disguised as a long-term agreement. These bizarre financial terms stem from cold, hard accounting rather than controversy. Ownership never even considered voiding his roster spot. Instead, they finalized the paperwork, manipulated the salary cap perfectly, and let their superstar celebrate the renewal from his living room the moment the market opened, triggering an instant venue buyout following the announcement. The Kansas City dynasty remains bulletproof. Media reports were entirely fabricated. The Gridiron product validates the truth. This concludes our present analytical breakdown. To explore further investigative content examining similar matters, simply select the interactive modules currently displayed across your